Hello everyone, good morning in Italy, good afternoon from China. I'm Gianpaolo Bruno, Director of the Italian Trade Agency Office in Beijing, Coordinator of the Italian Trade Agency Offices in China and Mongolia. And today we are gathered here to listen to the presentation of our last research on the fashion sector in continental China and Hong Kong after the COVID-19 outbreak. And we will make this presentation with the company that has performed the research, InterChina. Before doing this, I will leave the floor to Mr. Marco Midolo, Head of the Commercial Office of the Embassy of Italy in Beijing, for his welcome remarks.
Dear Mr. Gianpaolo Bruno, Italian Trade Commissioner and Coordinator of ITA offices in China and Mongolia, distinguished speakers, Mr. James Sinclair and Jason Zhang, Partner and Senior Project Manager of InterChina, friends from the business community, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very happy to be here with you today for this webinar aimed at analyzing and updating our business community about China's fashion industry challenges and opportunities in the post-COVID scenario. I would like to thank you and to thank the Italian Trade Commissioner for addressing such an important issue through solid data and perspective analysis that I'm sure will help gaining a deeper understanding of the state of the art of this strategic industry from multiple angles. As you are certainly aware, fashion is one of the pillars of the Italian exports worldwide and in China, and an iconic representation of the Made in Italy concept, combining beauty, innovation, and tradition. China is already a primary destination for Italian fashion brands, which are so popular among Chinese consumers. In the post-pandemic scenario, many are the opportunities offered by the Chinese market, one of the biggest in the world. At the same time, consumer patterns, market demand, and supply chains have changed considerably during and after COVID, and the current economic scenario could continue to affect consumer spending in 2023. Market information is therefore key. Digital transformation and sustainability are also core elements to address in order to attract consumers, with particular reference to the Chinese young generation who mainly buy fashion products from their smartphones and show an increasing interest in green products, where Italian brands are at the forefront. Italy has been guest country of honor at the China International Consumer Products Expo that took place in Haikou in April. The Italian high-profile participation has showed once again the popularity of the Made in Italy in the Chinese market and the commitment by the Italian institutions to promote and support it. This is a clear priority, and I would like to assure you that the Italian Embassy in Beijing, the Consulate General all over China, together with the Italian Trade Commission and the Italian Chamber of Commerce, are actively engaged in supporting the Italian fashion industry in China. Without further ado, I leave the floor to Mr. Gianpaolo Bruno and to the distinguished speakers. Thank you once again, and I wish all the participants a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
And thank you very much indeed, Mr. Marco Midolo, Head of the Economic and Commercial Office of the Embassy of Italy in Beijing. Ladies and gentlemen, so I'm very delighted to stand before you today to present the findings of this comprehensive market research on fashion final products conducted by InterChina on behalf of the Italian Trade Agency Office in Beijing. The purpose of this research is to assist Italian companies in navigating the complex post-COVID-19 market landscape, providing them with valuable insights and strategic guidance to effectively position themselves in the fashion industry on the Chinese market. The global pandemic has had a profound impact on business worldwide, and of course the fashion industry has been no exception. And as the world slowly recovers from the disruptions caused by the COVID-19, it is crucial for Italian companies to understand the evolving market dynamics in China, consumer behavior, emerging trends, in order to adapt and thrive in this new environment. And the Italian Trade Agency has been at the forefront of supporting Italian businesses, and with this market research, we aim to provide practical and actionable information to fashion companies looking to capitalize on the opportunities presented by the post-pandemic market. Our research has involved extensive data analysis, consumer surveys, market trend analysis to provide a comprehensive understanding of the current landscape. And in this presentation, we will delve into key areas such as consumer preferences, shifting demand patterns, emerging market segments. We will explore the impact of e-commerce and digital marketing, as well as sustainability and ethical considerations that are gaining momentum in the industry. Additionally, we will discuss market entry strategies and potential collaboration to leverage the strengths of the Italian fashion in the Chinese market. The insights from this research will not only help Italian companies identify new growth avenues, but also enable them to make informed decisions on product development, branding, distribution channels, and market strategies. Our goal is to provide a roadmap for Italian companies to navigate the post-COVID-19 market landscape in China, empowering them to capitalize on emerging opportunities and overcome possible challenges. Last year, Italian exports of finished apparel and leather goods in a broader sense total, as you will see, 8 billion euros. That is 28% of Italy's total export to China, and China is the first export market for Italian fashion exports. To capitalize on these opportunities, Italian fashion brands should conduct market research, develop a strong understanding of Chinese consumer preferences, adapt their marketing strategies to resonate with the target audience. And this is exactly what we would like to achieve through our research today. And we would like to express our sincere gratitude to Inter-China for the very interesting insights providing. And we are looking forward to receiving valuable inputs from all participants, industry experts, stakeholders, to ensure the reliability and relevance of our findings. But without further ado, let us delve into the fascinating world of fashion, uncover the latest market trends, explore the untapped potential waiting to be seized by the Italian companies in the post-COVID-19 market landscape. Thank you very much, and let us embark on this exciting journey together. And I therefore invite Mr. James Sinclair, partner of Inter-China, to present the results of the research. Mr. Sinclair, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno, and it's a privilege to be speaking with you this morning, this afternoon. So I will run through a summary of the work that we've done in recent months. And towards the end of the summary, I'll share with you the other materials that are available with a more in-depth report and also various databases, lists of potential partners and whatnot, so that you're aware of the kind of resources that are available. So there are two people on today's webinar that were in the InterChina team running the study. So myself, I'm a partner with InterChina. I've been living and working in China for 20 years. And my colleague, Jason Zhang, who is a specialist project manager in the consumer space. Both of us have been with InterChina for quite some time. InterChina is a China-based advisory firm with 40 professionals in Beijing and Shanghai, and a particular strength in the consumer space. So today's webinar, and as I mentioned, this is a summary of the work that we've done. I'll quickly run through an introduction to the project, then lay out the market structure with some facts and some figures, and then very importantly, move on to the route to market models that are relevant to imported fashion, especially Italian brands. I'll focus on a number of these route to market models, cross-border e-commerce, working with local multi-brand retailers, and also establishing mono-brand stores on domestic e-commerce platforms. And then I'll wrap up with what we see as the key success factors for Italian fashion brands entering and building their businesses in China. So a quick word on the project and how that was conceived. So we ran the project from October last year through to March this year, which covers the period when the pandemic was still very much relevant in China, through the relaxation of some of the restrictions in November and December, and then through to the sort of post-pandemic period in February and March. So the project's been run through these various different periods. The scope of the project was to cover imported fashion from Italy, specifically apparel, shoes or footwear, leather goods, accessories, and eyewear. So these were the main fashion categories. We were specifically looking at the opportunities and the route to market approaches for small to medium-sized Italian fashion companies with quality products in premium segments. So not the mass market and not the global luxury market. So the premium or quality market segments. And our research has been based upon many trade interviews with various stakeholders, whether they be best practice case studies, route to market partners, retailers in China, lots of trade interviews to gather the latest trends, the latest best practices, and to provide the input into the work that we're going to share with you today. So let's start then with the market structure and the overall retail value for our 5 fashion categories. These values are in billion euros. So pre-pandemic, in euro value, the total retail value was up around 300 billion euros. That looks flat, but actually, if you look at that in terms of renminbi, local currency, it's been growing, and it's the exchange rate that's changed over that time to make it look flat in euro value. During the pandemic, it was volatile, and you can imagine that there were disruptions to supply chains, to consumer sentiment. There was a rebound in 2021. So it's been volatile, but as we go to the future, we expect fashion retail to continue to grow. That will partly be related to consumption. There'll be continued consumption upgrade and diversification in China, but it will also be due to the shift of so then we turn to imports. Imports have gradually been growing over the period. So back in 2010, you can see that imports were 6% of total fashion retail. That's grown to around about 13% as of today, and we expect that to continue to grow to about 16% in the coming few years. Now, it's very important to look at what's driving those imports. It's partly the overall consumption upgrade and diversification, but also importantly, it's because some of the supply chains are shifting out of China, and then the demand that still needs to be met requires the finished products to be imported back into China. So there's a little bit of that related to the development and maturation of demand, and a little bit about the restructuring of supply chains. But nevertheless, imports are going to continue to grow. Then if we drill down a little bit further on imports, the top chart shows the split of imports in terms of CIF value between the different categories. But let me highlight the bottom chart, which are the imports specifically from Italy. Imports have been growing quickly. In the 6 years or so, up to 2022, they've been growing at around 24% per annum. And they're expected to continue to grow well north of 10% per annum. Mr. Bruno mentioned that the current value is around 8 billion euros. We expect it to get up to about 14 billion euros in the next few years. And it means that Italy is taking an increasing share of those total fashion imports. So as of today, Italy's share is 28%, and we expect it to increase that share up to about 30%. So Italian fashion is already doing well. It is a success story in the Chinese market. What's been happening is that the global luxury brands from Italy have been aggressive in China. They've been developing the market, and that's created a pull then for smaller Italian fashion brands that are starting to follow in their wake. So there is a lot of benefit to be had from the work in market development that's been done by global luxury fashion brands. If we turn to consumers and have a look at consumer needs or consumer perceptions against what different fashion brands have to offer, it's an interesting picture. So first of all, let me talk about the main consumer segments for imported fashion. There are three. The first is the younger generation, Gen Z, so consumers that are in their early 20s. The second are the white collar workers, a little bit older, mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tend to be single or recently married, higher disposable income. And then China's new middle class, again, a little bit older still, in their 30s or early 40s, living in the bigger cities, young families, and with a higher disposable income. So we might have about 200 million people that are Gen Z, maybe another 200 million that are white collar workers, and somewhere around 300 million that are in the new middle class. So these people are all relevant in different ways to imported fashion. It excludes people that are lower income, blue collar workers, more elderly demographics, and living in the smaller cities. Those profiles are much less relevant to imported fashion. Now, if you look at how they perceive imported fashion from around the world, there are some characteristics that are commonly appreciated, as you can imagine. So high quality, modern or practical, original design, that the brands have a strong sense of identity or unique styles. Those are generic. Those are common to brands from all origins. What is distinct for Italian fashion brands are the following characteristics. So the craftsmanship, exquisite craftsmanship, especially famous for leather goods, artistic culture, the aesthetic quality, the elegance of the products, the beauty of the design, and then a sense of romance. So tapping into the emotional side of consumer purchasing, a sense of romance and happiness and love. So these particular characteristics are strongly associated with Italian fashion brands, and in many cases, it will make sense to tap into those perceptions if your brand and if your product portfolios resonate with those perceptions. Now, there are some characteristics which are maybe less relevant to Italian fashion brands, as we've done our consumer research, at least at present. So sustainability or the green proposition there might be other origins, other countries which are perhaps perceived to be further ahead in this way. Minimalist designs or low profile designs or unisex designs. Again, there might be some other country origins that are perceived to be further ahead in that way. And then particularly distinct logos or styling details. But across all of our consumer segments, especially for the distinct characteristics of Italian fashion brands, there's a strong perception that those are relevant. So we've talked about market structure, and now I'd like to move on to the main route to market models that are being used by imported fashion companies to reach the Chinese consumer. To do that, let's first of all sort of describe the landscape of retail in China. So these are the main retail channels with the share of retail by value in 2022. So the colors above the line are offline channels, and the colors below the dotted line are online channels, with online now accounting for just under 40% of total imported fashion retail. Now that's 40% today. That's grown, as you can imagine, through the pandemic very, very quickly. What we expect is that online channels will continue to take share. However, the growth is going to slow down. Offline channels are going to regain some strength now that the pandemic has finished. And there are two main reasons for that. The first is that Chinese consumers shopping experience is a social experience for them, and offline is much more suited to a social shopping experience. And then the second, of course, is the sensory nature of exploring products, and that feeds into their purchasing decisions. And we're seeing that the bigger fashion brands that have a very strong presence in China are very actively trying to develop their offline channels once again. So we imagine that that 40% split, it may grow a little bit in favor of online, but it's not going to transform into a dominant online retail environment. Offline stores. Now in the rest of this presentation, you'll hear me refer to multi-brand retailers. So many of these are locally owned with a strong online and offline presence. Monobrand stores, so these are the branded stores, either directly operated by brands, normally big brands, or they're franchised. We have a number of other offline channels, department stores and travel retail operators. And then online, DEC stands for domestic e-commerce. So large e-commerce platforms like Tmall, and then social e-commerce channels like WeChat. And then cross-border e-commerce is a specific channel. Cross-border e-commerce is a specific channel that is where you're using a bonded warehouse in China to hold the inventory. And then upon place of order by the consumer, the goods will be released and go through customs. it's become a popular channel, especially during the pandemic, because it's quite easy to then access the Chinese consumer. However, the delivery times are still a little bit slower than domestic e-commerce. Domestic e-commerce, maybe delivery in the bigger cities will be under 1 day. With cross-border e-commerce, it could be 2 to 3 days because the goods still need to go through customs. And Chinese consumers have very high expectations for rapid delivery. So even that couple of days difference can that may affect their experience as a consumer with the brand. So those are the main retail channels, but how do we reach them? And there are 4 main route to market models. Now, of course, there are many other variations, but what we've done is we've simplified it into to the 4 main route to market models. Some of them are more suited to testing the water, so a lower investment, a lower risk, but that would help you then decide whether you do have strong market potential and you should invest further. Then there's a model that's better suited to more proactive market development. So you're established, you've got some traction, some proof of demand. So you invest a little bit further, and that allows you to determine whether you should, how you should continue to grow your business in future in China. And then you've got a scale model where you really have significant investments in China, much more direct operation, and in-market presence, and that allows you to learn and adapt to the Chinese consumer needs. So there's an evolution here. You don't have to follow these in a sequence of steps, but there is a natural evolution, and many of the brands that we've spoken to do tend to follow an evolution where they manage the level of investment and risk over time, increasing the level of investment as they grow in confidence. So 1A here, if I go down to the bottom left-hand corner, so 1A and 1B, this is really focused on working with multi-brand retailers, but in different ways. So 1A is international multi-brand retailers that have tapped into China's cross-border e-commerce infrastructure. So this could be the likes of Revolve or Monnier or HBX, these international multi-brand retailers, and they have a cross-border e-commerce infrastructure. So that's one way. 1B is to work with local multi-brand retailers. Now they are relevant to domestic e-commerce, so they will have stores on domestic e-commerce platforms. So that's tapping into the domestic e-commerce environment. Number 2 in the middle is taking that step further forward and operating monobrand stores on local domestic e-commerce platforms in China. You wouldn't be doing that alone. You would need to be working with an in-market partner, a route to market partner. And I will go through some of the different types of route to market partners. But that's getting you closer to market with your own store on a local platform. And then number 3, the more advanced option, is when you have your own in-market operation with a subsidiary, and then you would be covering a much wider range of retail channels, much closer to market. So allow me to start to go through. I'll just describe these in a little bit more detail, and so that you can see exactly what it looks like. So first of all, what do the structures of these 4 route to market channels look like? So these are the same ones, 1A, 1B, 2, and 3. With 1A, who is the customer for you? Well, it's the international multi-brand retailer, and you would be transacting with them in Europe or in Italy. So it's a local transaction, and then it's the international multi-brand retailer that then handles the export into China through their cross-border e-commerce infrastructure. So lots of brands are using this model. but each brand tends to only be selling a relatively small volume of product into China using this model. So lots of brands, a small volume each. So it's a very common entry point. 1B, so here we have international trade. So the customer would be the multi-brand retailer in China, and this is now general trade selling to them in China. So you need pre-market approvals to get product across the border to the multi-brand retailers in China. This is getting you a little bit closer again to the consumer. There are more consumers on domestic e-commerce platforms than there are on cross-border e-commerce platforms. And some of these local multi-brand retailers also have an offline operation with their own stores. So this gets you a little bit closer to the consumer. Again, it's quite a popular model. Quite a few brands are using it, but it still tends to be relatively small volumes per brand. Model number 3, again, it's international trade. Your customer then is likely to be the route to market partner if they're trading on their own account. You could have your own subsidiary sitting in between. The WFOE is a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, that's a subsidiary. But then this opens up many more channels if you have a partner that's working with you. The main channel that we have here in the red circle would be your monobrand store on a local platform. But you could start to enter other retail channels in addition. And as I mentioned, you can start to enter offline stores too. And finally, we have the most important for big brands, which is your own in-market operation with your own subsidiary in China. So that's the wholly owned foreign enterprise again. And this is really useful if you want to set up your own monobrand stores, physical monobrand stores in China. You really need to run that through your own subsidiary with your own team. So that's what the structures of these different route to market models look like. I've mentioned a few times different online platforms, and I wanted to provide you with the landscape of these online platforms. And it's a complicated picture because China has its own sort of ecosystem of online platforms that are really quite distinct from what we have in Europe. Some of them come from social media backgrounds, but are gradually adding e-commerce or social commerce on top. Some of them are really coming from online retail backgrounds, but they might be adding social commerce or social media functionality on top. In the middle, we have the main platforms. So WeChat, Red, TikTok, Kuaishou, Tmall Global, JD Worldwide. These are really the main platforms. They have the largest number of users. They are referred to for research, and they have the highest, they have the biggest influence in terms of digital word of mouth. It's where most of the key opinion leaders, the influencers are active, and it's where a lot of the retail volume takes place. The cross-border e-commerce platforms are the likes of Tmall Global and JD Worldwide, but then they also have their domestic e-commerce counterparts, so Tmall and JD.com. There are also international platforms active in China. Farfetch is very active, Net-a-Porter, etc. Many of these have a cross-border e-commerce infrastructure, which Italian fashion brands can tap into. Towards the right of this slide, there are a number of other platforms. They tend to be smaller. They may be specialized in imported fashion, but they tend to be smaller. So if you're looking at an entry point, you really want an entry point that is a bigger platform. Focus on getting that right first. You can add additional smaller, more niche platforms over time, but the entry point should be with the bigger platforms. So let me now drill down into some of the specific routes to market and what they look like. And I'll begin with international multi-brand retailers that are operating on cross-border e-commerce platforms. So let me just recap this cross-border e-commerce. I mentioned that this is a specific model that makes it quite easy to export into China. The reason is that you don't have to conform to some of the regulations, the same regulations, the pre-market approvals that you do with general trade. So it's a fast and relatively easy way to start selling products into China. It uses a bonded warehouse, which so you have bulk shipping to the bonded warehouse. It has a higher cost involved compared to general trade, but it's easier in many other ways. And then it's got that slightly slower delivery time. Handling returns is trickier, but generally it's a good way to an easy and quick way to enter. Now there are a number of different ways that you can organize a cross-border e-commerce structure, and some of them are more relevant to smaller brands because it's just more practical, and some of them are more relevant to larger fashion brands. Maybe they're a little bit more complex to operate, or the partners or involved only like to work with bigger brands. So there are two that are more relevant to smaller fashion brands, and these are the ones that I've highlighted in green. These are both generally feasible. The first one is a traditional buy and sell model. So working with an international multi-brand retailer, they will have a global online retail website that has a plugin to the Chinese cross-border e-commerce infrastructure. So you're selling to the international multi-brand retailer, and the Chinese consumer will find your products on their websites and be able to receive products through a cross-border e-commerce mechanism. The second way is more of a marketplace model. So again, you're selling to the international multi-brand retailer, but then they have a store on a local cross-border e-commerce platform, a marketplace platform. And the Chinese consumer then, if they're on the Tmall Global or JD Worldwide platform, they can visit the multi-brand retailer store on that platform. So in both cases, for you, the brand, you're selling to the multi-brand retailer, but the way that the multi-brand retailer, the international multi-brand retailer functions is a little bit different. Either they're using their global website or they've got their store on the local cross-border e-commerce platform. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other models here that are more relevant to large and medium and large brands, but in the main report, there are more details about how that works, what the kind of costs involved are, and which kind of partners might be relevant. But for small and medium-sized brands, those are the two main cross-border e-commerce models that are relevant. And so who are these international multi-brand retailers? Well, you have lots of boutiques, smaller players, and we've put some examples here. And then you have some larger players that we put down at the bottom, the likes of HBX and Monier and Revolve. And they have different country origins. So there are plenty that have an Italian origin. Now, these multi-brand retailers, they can tap into the cross-border e-commerce infrastructure in different ways. So I've talked about being on one of the local cross-border e-commerce platforms like Tmall Global. They can be on one of the international cross-border e-commerce platforms. Farfetch has a cross-border e-commerce platform. They can have their own WeChat store. WeChat is one of the super apps in China. It's used for everything, and brands can have their own cross-border e-commerce retail stores on there. They can use their own websites, often with a plugin, and they can even use their own apps. So the multi-brand retailers we've listed here, they have a presence in China, cross-border e-commerce presence in many different ways. And they're very relevant to all of the fashion categories within the scope of our research, everything from apparel through to accessories and eyewear. On the Farfetch website, it lists 200 multi-brand retailers that have an Italian operation. Not all of them will be relevant to cross-border e-commerce, but still, I mean, there are many options for Italian fashion brands to tap into multi-brand retailers that have a cross-border e-commerce mechanism, route to market in China. And allow me just to talk a little bit more about Farfetch. So China is an extremely important market for Farfetch, and they have made considerable progress in developing their own model in China, and that includes a partnership with Alibaba, so China's biggest online operator. So Richemont and Alibaba formed a partnership to jointly invest in Farfetch a couple of years ago. And as part of that, they created a JV, a joint venture called Farfetch China. Now, the key thing here is that it allows Farfetch to be active in Alibaba's luxury pavilion. So this is a space on their platform for luxury brands. So for Chinese consumers, and Alibaba has about 800 million Chinese consumers that are purchasing from their stores. This gives them access to Farfetch and the brands that Farfetch is carrying. So that's if you are already active on Farfetch in Europe, it makes it much easier for Chinese consumers to find you now in China. So that's cross-border e-commerce. That's the first way to enter China. And then I wanted to expand further on the local multi-brand retailers. So that's our second model that we reviewed. And here I've listed 6 interesting or relevant multi-brand retailers from China. We have a database of 40 in total that are included in the final report. Here are 6 that are particularly relevant. They're all Chinese. They've all got their own online store or stores. Some of them have offline stores in addition. They tend to be multi-category players. So many of them are active across apparel, shoes, accessories. They may have 100,000 followers on Tmall. Through their online stores, their top selling products or SKUs should be selling about 100,000 or over 100,000 units a month. And their top selling products include imported fashion brands. So these are all of some significant scale, but still very much boutiques that are focused on imported fashion, and at the more or less at the right price points that are for premium or quality imported fashion brands. So there are more of these local multi-brand retailers that we've identified, but here these are some of the more relevant. and a profile of SND, which is perhaps a particularly interesting example. So SND has been around for about 10 years. They're active across all of the categories that are relevant to us, with a particular focus on bringing independent premium brands to Chinese consumers in the southwest of China. So they don't cover the whole of China. They originate from the southwest of China, and that's where most of their retail sales and stores are. They're working with brands, many brands from Europe, including from Italy. They have online stores on multiple platforms. But what I wanted to really show you was the in-store environment, because these multi-brand retailers are elegant environments to display merchandise, to have your products on sale and to build some brand awareness. So there's these are quite sophisticated retailers presenting the right kind of retail platform for quality Italian brands. And then, so we've talked about cross-border e-commerce, we've talked about local multi-brand retailers, and the last one to drill down into is the domestic e-commerce, building a monobrand store on a domestic e-commerce platform. Now, things change a little bit here because this is operating your own store, but we wouldn't suggest trying to do that yourselves. We would suggest doing that with a route to market partner or a brand partner. Very interesting over the past few years is that the types of partner available it's really improved during the pandemic, because of some of the challenges that were presented. New types of partner appeared in order to solve some of these challenges for imported brands, imported fashion brands. So the new type of partner that I just mentioned is the one in the middle here, the brand partners. But let me just run through the three main types of partners so you can understand what the difference is. The first type of partner are the traditional importer distributors that you would be familiar working with. In China, these importers and distributors, they have their history largely in offline retail. Many of them will claim to be strong in running online retail stores and operations, but the reality is that they're not as strong as they generally claim. So these are traditionally offline retailers, and so they're not best suited for this particular model of building a monobrand store on a local e-commerce, a domestic e-commerce platform. The brand partners are newer, and many have appeared in the past 3 years or perhaps a little bit longer. So they came into being in order to help launch international brands in China. So to help them enter, to help them launch, but without these brands needing to have their own people in China. So they function as the China team of the brand. So they tend to have quite a broad set of capabilities across online and offline, from logistics and operations through to store management, and also brand building, even market research and data collection. So a broad set of capabilities. So they are therefore good partners for small and medium-sized brands to consider working with when in early stages of entering China or developing the Chinese market. So I have a few examples, and I'll come back to that later. The third type of partner are called TPs, so technical partners. Their strength is really in running an online store. In China, this has become a very specialized activity, running an online store on Tmall or Tmall Global, on JD or JD Worldwide. It's very much a specialized activity, and even quite big brands will work with TPs to help them run their online stores because it's so specialized. But they don't tend to be the right partners if you are entering China. They tend to be better partners if you are if you've already got people in China that can work closely with the TPs. TPs need to be managed. So the ideal partner then for market entry are these brand partners that I've highlighted in the middle. Here's one example, and again, in the full report, we have profiles of 10 of them, but just one example. This one's called Triple Digit. They were established in 2016, so actually just before the pandemic. And they have about 100 employees, so they have some significant size, and many of their capabilities are in-house. So, for example, for digital marketing, they have their own studios, so they can record promotion, or they can run live streaming events through their own studios. They cover some of the categories relevant to us, so watches, footwear, apparel. They're active on quite a wide range of local platforms, Tmall, Tmall Global. In terms of brand selection, they both actively look for brands to add to their portfolio, but they also receive inquiries from brands that approach them. And I'll talk now a little bit more about what these different brand partners look for when they're considering brands. This is not just for Triple Digit, but this is for all of the brand partners that we spoke to. So, as I mentioned, some of them are actively looking for new brands, and there are a number of considerations there. So when they're looking for a new brand, they're often looking for what you could call the next big thing. Something with brands which have success in their home markets, so this would be in Europe or in Italy, but maybe not yet. The Chinese consumer has not yet picked up on this new trend, but they can imagine Chinese influencers or Chinese key opinion leaders getting behind this new brand to promote this new brand. It's got something to say. It's something a little bit different. It's novel. So they're very interested in brands that have that kind of positioning at the moment. The brand partners, they also talk to the big domestic e-commerce platforms, so JD and Tmall, and they ask them what the platforms are looking for. That's not just to find out what should be popular, what has potential, but then they know that the platforms will be more cooperative when it comes to promoting brands in these spaces or these particular brands. So they're looking for the next big thing. They talk to the platforms. This helps guide them when they search across Italy or across Europe for which brands that they would like to carry. But then they also consider approaches from brands directly. First of all, they will look at the brand profile. Now, they'll be looking for brands that obviously could have potential in China. So price points for per item price points of a few thousand RMB. What they want to do is capture consumers that will choose a premium product over a global luxury product, and to tap into the shift in demand that is coming now from global luxury into premium. They prefer brands that have some level of awareness in China, so that they are not going to start marketing from zero. So quite often if a brand has already got a presence in a multi-brand retailer, as we've been talking about, that has built a little bit of consumer awareness, that would give the brand partner confidence that there's some proof of demand, and their marketing would be starting from a slightly more advanced position. In terms of potential scale, they will have a look at what competing brands are selling to judge the potential for a new brand. And many of these brand partners will be looking to get to 50 to 100 million renminbi in net sales within a few years. That's the kind of potential that they're looking for. And then in terms of how they work with brands, they're hoping that to find brands that want to cooperate with them. So not a traditional distribution relationship where the products are just passed over and there's no further interaction or collaboration, but where the brands are ready to work with the brand partners to solve problems, make adaptations, to help, to some extent, jointly develop the market. That's the kind of partnership style that they're looking for. Right, so it's time to reach some conclusions and to bring this all together into some what you could call key success factors or points to pay attention to if you are now looking at entering China or developing further in China. So 9 points here. The first one is that we would suggest not rushing straight into execution, not picking up the telephone and giving one of these route to market partners a call straight away. We would suggest doing a little bit of planning first. This is particularly important if you're not sure your brand or portfolio is particularly distinct, has a strong story to tell that would resonate with the Chinese consumer. That planning then could help to figure out how best to position your portfolio or your brand, or maybe which products to bring to China first that are maybe a little bit more distinct or a little bit more relevant for the Chinese consumer. You should expect, a competitive marketplace, so it's important to play to your strengths. The second is clear, as we've discussed, to decide the right route to market structure. So should it be a cross-border e-commerce or directly working with the multi-brand local retailers? Or do you jump a little bit more, a little further ahead and speak to a route to market partner straight away with regard to setting up your own store in China? Channel focus, we strongly recommend having a focused retail approach at the beginning, which means choosing one or two channels, one or two retail platforms, rather than spreading wide. So make a success of the first one or two, put your resources in that, and then expand more broadly. When you're selecting a partner, do that proactively. Don't just work with the first route to market partner you find or the first one that comes to you and wants to work with you. There are many route to market partners out there. They have different profiles, and you need to find the one that's right for your brand and portfolio. So their category specialization, they're not too big, which big partners might not provide you with sufficient support, but also not too small that they have the capabilities to provide you with the support that you need. And then cultural connection. Many of these, the brand partners I've described, they actually have some kind of connection with Europe. They might have been founded by Europeans. They may have Italian speakers. So a cultural connection can make a difference here. If you are going for a route to market partnership, do consider whether you could take a sequence of steps to get there. Maybe start with a multi-brand retailer and then look for a route to market partner. The reason, as I mentioned previously, is that if you can prove some demand, if you can build a little bit of awareness through multi-brand retail, that will make you much more attractive to a potential route to market partner. Marketing spend is the next one. So being available in a retail channel doesn't mean that you're going to generate demand. It's a competitive marketplace. There are lots of brands. So your brand does need to be supported with some marketing spend. Most likely that will be on Chinese social media. It could be in-platform activities. If you're present on JD or Tmall, some promotion activities related to their platforms, or it could be off-platform activities in other channels. But some level of marketing spend is likely to be needed. Tap international travel. Chinese tourists are starting to travel again. There are more flights now between China and Europe. At present, it tends to be more business and luxury travel, but through the rest of this year, we'll start to see some more regular tourism travel. Now, if you can expose your brand to Chinese tourists in Italy, maybe in shopping malls where they visit, in outlet malls, in travel retail, this can help then generate interest in your brand back at home, back in China. So have a think, is there a way that you can tap Chinese travel to Italy, expose your brand to Chinese tourists? Trademark registration. There are two reasons to do this. The first, obviously, is to protect your trademark, your brand in China. China's trademark system is a first to file. So you want to file your brand before anybody else, register your brand. The second reason is that some of the platforms, the domestic e-commerce platforms, require you to have a locally registered trademark in order to list on their platforms. So trademark registration is really something you should initiate straight away if you're considering selling into China. And then the last key success factor here is patience and persistence. There's a lot of buzz around selling into China, but it is a market that not many brands are going to make a return in the first year. It requires a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, a little bit of persistence, but the potential is there. If we put all of this on a timeline, you could imagine a timeline over a number of years, broken down here into quarters. So in the first quarter, the first 3 months, this is where we would suggest going through some planning. So I mentioned assessing your opportunity and figuring out which approach you want to take. Once you've made the decision on how you want to proceed, then it could take another 6 or 9 months to get to the point where you're ready to launch sales in China. It depends on which model. Cross-border e-commerce will be quicker, and that can all be done in a few months. So that means registering your trademark, making sure that you've assigned people with various responsibilities. If relevant, you're approaching your route to market partners and negotiating how you're going to work together. And then you need the setup of your operation, whether that's setting up the online store or developing the marketing plan or what have you. So all of that could take a number of months during that before you're ready to really launch. Then once you have launched, consider, as I mentioned, going through a number of different phases. So start with a test and sort of learn, and then move on to something that with a little bit more investment, a little bit more risk. And if you're really doing very well, you can consider going into an omni-channel operation with your own subsidiary in China. And so give your business 12 months, 18 months to see how it's performing with your existing route to market structure, and then evaluate whether you want to move on to the next kind of structure. So a sort of phased rollout. And my final slide for this presentation is just to share with you the materials that are available for you in the full report. So today we've worked through the workshop presentation. There's also a full report for the finished products, which goes into, it has a broader scope and goes into more detail. And there are appendices. So we have trade data for the various categories. We've got case studies for other international fashion brands that may have a similar profile to you and how they've built their market in China. And as I mentioned, we've got brand partner profiles, 10 of them, for these brand partners that might be the best type of partners if you're looking to set up your own monobrand stores on domestic e-commerce platforms. We've also got a number of databases, so lists of local multi-brand retailers, 40 of them, and a full route-to-market partner database with 90 route-to-market partners that you could consider, split by different types of route-to-market partner. So plenty of resources there. And just so that you know, in addition to finished products, we also worked on intermediate products, so leather, textiles, fur, and there are reports available for the intermediate products too. But today's focus is finished products. So, Mr. Bruno, allow me to pause there and I'd be very happy to answer any questions should the audience have them.
Dear Mr. Sinclair, thank you very much indeed. It is really research that is a wealth of information and a lot of useful insights for our company, and we very much appreciate also the customization of the research findings targeted on the typical features of Italian small, medium-sized brands, of having premium products and specializing in high-end segments of the markets, even though they might not be known in China at the moment. And so thank you all for very much for all the tips that you have represented as route to market in order to serve this navigate this new normal of the Chinese market after the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Yes, as you said, we will. There are many requests for the research. Of course, we will share all the available deliverables of this research, and we will communicate with all the participants about that. And I would like to also emphasize the fact that our research was very broad in our scope. So we looked at the final products, but also we wanted to look and identify potential opportunities in the intermediate product markets. And so we have also, as Mr. Sinclair just said, we have a set of information products related to the intermediate product markets within the fashion industry. That will be also a matter for a further webinar that is being scheduled for the 31st of May. So all the companies that might be interested in supply intermediate products to the Chinese fashion value chain might be interested in following also that webinar. Just to wrap up, I would like to ask you very briefly to outline the market situation from the perspective of the first months of 2023. So what do you think about market demand and market trends that we have seen in the first months, and what do you think will be the evolution in the next few months, and what do we have to expect from the Chinese market in terms of absorption also of important fashion goods from Italy and from the world? If you would like to have some.
So I know that around the world there's been very strong expectation or hope that there would be a rebound in Chinese consumption, Chinese demand through 2023, and that there's a little bit of disappointment that the strength of the rebound is not really there. However, I think actually from our perspective, I think it was quite unrealistic to expect a very strong rebound, like we saw in 2020, that it was always going to take a little bit more time. So we are cautiously optimistic that things will strengthen through the second half of this year, so Q3 and Q4. So it's been soft in the first half. Demand has only gradually picked up, but in the second half, we think it will pick up more strongly, and that's because consumer confidence takes a while to come back in this environment. Beijing is it's extremely important that the economy returns to a sort of healthy growth this year, and that includes consumption and consumer demand. So there's political support. Disposable income has been growing. Inflation is not too high. So some of the fundamentals there are fine. It's just about the return of consumer confidence and consumer sentiment. And the economy, it's been a little bit shaky with the property market, and there's a lot of consumer wealth tied up in the property market. So it's just taking a little bit of time to return. But I think what's quite interesting is that not all segments are performing in the same way. So actually, the best performing segments are in global luxury at the moment. It seems that the higher net worth or the higher income consumers, their sentiment has remained strong, or it is strong. The mass market is where, and premium too, is where consumers are more cautious at the moment. So there are sort of two trajectories, one for luxury and the other one for premium and mass, which are a little bit different. But anyway, I think through the second half of this year, things will strengthen.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's good news for the industry. Then we have some very specific questions. One from Ms. Marco Bambara. How does the trademark registration system work in China? Well, before you maybe you would like to give a synthetic answer, I would like to remind Ms. Bambara that here at the office, at the Beijing office, we have a desk. It's called IPR desk, intellectual property rights desk, that it is managed by a law firm, giving for free some advice and consultancy services to Italian companies with IPR issues here in China, and also giving some information about the system of trademark rules and regulations here in China. I don't know if Mr. Sinclair would like to have a few words about it.
Yeah, so I think most important point is that you would need an agent or a lawyer to help you with the registration. So Mr. Bruno just laid out the option there with the ITA desk. The process is relatively straightforward. However, the most important thing is timing. So we have a first to file system in China, which means that whoever registers the trademark first owns that trademark in China. And you can result in a situation where you have trademark squatters. So somebody else that maybe has spotted that you have a nice brand and they've gone ahead and registered it, and they're sitting on that trademark registration. And that can be problematic. So the most important thing, as we had in one of our charts, is that as soon as you want to enter China, you would contact the ITA desk to talk to them about registering your trademark. The sooner you do that, the better. Perhaps even if you are only considering entering China, you might want to look at trademark registration. It's not too costly. It's not too taxing to prepare the documents, and if it avoids having a trademark squatter in the future, then it will be worth doing. So I think timing is find somebody to help you, an agent or the ITA desk, and then get moving as quickly as you can.
Absolutely. I just would like to highlight how important it is. This factor, it is a crucial factor. Actually, the situation is a little better than a few years ago, because also the regulation has improved, and the protection for trademark previous holders, it is much better than it used to be before. But at the same time, there is the risk of having the trademark fraudulently taken over by somebody else. So it is actually advisable to register the trademark even before entering the Chinese market. And there are several ways you can do it. There is a direct way to file your trademark in China, or you can file your trademark in Europe with the extension to China, given the International Convention for trademark recognition. So it is really a point not to be overlooked, and so our desk is available to advise you on the several steps to be undertaken. A simple email, ipr.pechino@ice.it, ipr.pechino@ice.it, and the desk will answer your questions, and even they can set up an online meeting in order to discuss about your specific issues. Thank you very much for that. And then we also have another specific question by Krimosh, made in Italy, women's wear. Are there any rules about fabrics I can use to make the clothes? Are there fabrics that cannot entry to China? well, maybe this is more appropriate in the next webinar where we talk about intermediate products, but I don't know if Mr. Sinclair would like to have very general, I mean, it should be more specific in terms that we need to ask for the HS code of your fabric in order to check with the customs regulations if there are any impediments to export. But in general, I don't see any major problems related to that. But I don't know if Mr. Sinclair would like to have.
Yeah, so in the main report, we have the scope of the HS codes and therefore the products and materials that we've covered. I wonder, with regard to materials that are prohibited or restricted, I don't have any comments, but Jason, is there anything that you would add?
No, I think agree with Mr. Bruno. We better have the HS code, a specific HS code for that product, and then look at whether there are any restrictions and whether there are very significant demand for that specific fabric.
Cool. Okay. I think we are almost. I mean, at the end of our time. I don't see any further questions at the moment, but please do not hesitate to send your questions to pechino@ice.it, pechino@ice.it, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. And of course, we will send you all the information products that Inter-China has produced on our behalf. Having said this, I would like to thank you very much indeed for participating in this very interesting webinar, and really I would like to again thank very much indeed Inter-China for the very valuable insights and the very articulated research products that has produced on our behalf. So we will resume, we will have a new webinar on intermediate products on the 31st of May. So we will again see each other on that occasion, but our office is fully available should you need any further assistance on our side. Are there any other, Mr. Zhang, Mr. Sinclair, can we close it here?
Yeah, I think we can close it here. And Mr. Bruno, if there's anything that we can do to help with any questions that come in, we'd be very happy to. So, and thank you. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time this morning, this afternoon. It's been a pleasure for us.
Wonderful. So thank you, everybody, and see you soon on this channel. Thank you, and have a nice day ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.